Hi, welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about the passage of a dark night of the soul and actually what that means, how to recognize if you're going through one, what the stages are, and then some tips on navigating through it. So, before we kind of go into the stages, this is really a powerful topic, anyways, because through our spiritual journey, we do go through these passages because they're actually passages of transformation. They are passages and pathways of illumination. And that's what transformation really ultimately is. It's going from one state to another. And this passage is actually can be very uncomfortable, no question, but it's so sacred. It's so powerful because that's what it's doing. It's bringing enlightenment, which means we are going through a phase of disillusionment. And that means we're releasing, discarding any disillusions, any delusions, any conditioning or programming or imprinting. So it's like the veils are coming off and we're seeing different realities, which we're going to talk about as we go through the stages. And this is particularly even more emphasized as importance at this current time because humanity as a collective is currently going through a massive dark night of the soul because it's in such a evolutionary shift of consciousness, which is new enlightenment. Okay, so let's talk about how to recognize if you're going through one. So think of it like a phase of all of a sudden, or something happens when you don't recognize who you are anymore, or you don't recognize what's going on. You might just feel very hopeless. You might feel depressed. You might feel like things don't resonate the way that they used to. You don't feel fulfilled. You don't feel purposeful. You don't feel in alignment, and you might not necessarily know why you don't. This is the first stage as well. This first stage is actually the awakening. So let's explore it a little bit. This phase is potentially sometimes the most discombobulating or the most uncomfortable because there's a shattering of how we used to identify. What ultimately this path of enlightenment, and we call it a dark night of the soul because it feels so dark because we can't see. We can't see anymore what we used to see. We can't relate anymore to what we used to relate to. And ultimately what this path is an ego integration with our higher self, with our soul self. So as our soul starts to come through more, through the personality more and express more, there's an integration of the ego into that higher self. And we're continuously, we learn, grow, and heal on a spiral. So we're continuously going through these phases. It's just that when we go through, a particular phase of the dark night of the soul, it can feel very intense. And so just keep it in mind that it doesn't mean that we go through one and that's it. We can go through many at different times throughout our journey, throughout our life. Sometimes we can go through a dark night of the soul for a day. Sometimes we can be going through it for a year. So just because we're calling it the dark night of the soul doesn't mean it's always super intense and heavy. It means that some type of new enlightenment or transformation is happening and you're changed on the other side of it. That literally you could go into a weekend and all of a sudden have some really deep realizations, go through some healing, go through some releasing, go through some shedding, pain or emotions might come up during that time. And on the other side of it, which again can happen very quickly, all of a sudden you might see something different. You might feel different. You might relate to things differently. So invitation is to keep that in mind because oftentimes when we hear the dark night of the soul, we kind of, that sometimes can promote some fear. So invitation always, as we're approaching this conversation topic, if you're experiencing it, or even just hearing this, start to think, well, I don't want to experience that. Just remember that this is part of the journey. And it is part of that path of transformation, which means that we truly have within us the ingredients in order to move through it. Now, the first stage, saying all of that, the first stage is that stage of actual awakening. We might not identify anymore with who we were. And in that essence, there can be a sense of identity crisis, or there can be a sense of loss. Like, I'm grieving who I used to be. I'm grieving the life I used to have. Oftentimes, the dark night of the soul passage will be initiated by some big life change, transition, event, or trauma. But again, remember, it doesn't have to, especially in these times, because we have so much, just new consciousness available to us. You could wake up again feeling completely different. So keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a major thing. If you're questioning, if you're going through it and you're thinking, I haven't gone through anything major, that's okay. You don't have to have had gone through anything major to really go through this powerful passage and transformation. You could wake up one day and just feel like, I don't know who I am, or this doesn't fit anymore. It could be that you've changed a job. It could be that you moved. It could be that you finished school, or it could be that your kids moved out. It could be you turned a certain age. Again, it could be what's happening on the planet, and all of a sudden you're just not recognizing anymore what's happening and who you are in it. Sometimes, definitely, if there's been a trauma or a big loss, grief, sometimes it's who am I without that person, or grieving who I used to be, or grieving, that kind of period of my life. So again, it can be a multitude of things, but the first stage generally is where there's this disconnection from who we used to be, or we don't know who we are anymore. And that's where usually there's the most heaviest of the emotions. The second phase, the second stage, is when we actually go through a period of hermit, it's called. So hermit archetype is when we're actually really starting to withdraw from the world. Now, we might even find ourselves all of a sudden just organically in a hermit phase. And sometimes that's how the dark night of the soul works through. So generally, either you'll find yourself in a hermit phase, or you'll want one, crave one, and need one. This is where we go into what's called the void stage. And the void is when we really go into kind of, it feels like nothingness in a sense. It feels like really hard to stay grounded during this phase. It can feel just very surreal. It can feel very, again, discombobulating, because it's almost like there's just this, we're in a chrysalis phase, basically. The void, think of the void like the feminine womb, the divine feminine womb, where we are like, just kind of like birthing. We're in the womb where there's so much happening, there's so much developing, there's so much changing, but we're contained in this womb. So we might not be able to see what's ahead. We might not be able to fully relate or know kind of this, even the space we're in. Time and space at this period in this stage can feel a little bit weird as well. And this is an important phase to honor ourselves with, because, and we're going to go through the tips at the end of this podcast, but keep in mind that this phase is potentially one of the most significant ones, because there's deep things afoot here. And know that you're safe in this space. It can feel unsafe, because this is where we're really asked to relinquish control, let go, surrender. That's that yin energy. That's that divine feminine energy that we're in. So sometimes during this phase, it can feel a little bit scary, and it can feel a little bit foreign to us. But the other element of this is that other people might not understand that we need to hermit. They might be worried about us. We might not even understand it and know what we need. And so during this phase, it's important to honor ourselves and let ourselves be in that hermit phase until we feel we're done. We're going into the next stage organically. Navigating through this, and I will bring in one of the tips at this point, because sometimes navigating through this can be tricky. How do I know when I need extra outside support to navigate through? Because seeking counsel can be one of the supportive tools going through a dark night of the soul. This is the invitation, though, with this. Sometimes if we're going through something, it probably on some level is a dark night of the soul, regardless of whatever we're feeling. And unfortunately, if we don't have the right support, and I'm not saying there's right or wrong support, what I mean is if we don't have support to help us navigate, move the energies, understand, or hold, to have that even foundational support going through this, oftentimes what we're guided to do is suppress it. we're guided to just, medicate it, or we're guided to just kind of like, keep moving forward with life. And that's sometimes, again, it's not that it's right or wrong. Sometimes we need to do those things. It's just that we need to honor, or the invitation for us in this passage is that this passage is happening for a reason. There is a significant, very powerful purpose in these experiences, and that means there's alchemy happening. So if we need some support going through that alchemy because it's too intense, absolutely, that's beautiful if we need it. The thing is that we want to be able to move the energy and alchemize the energy. So if we're not allowing that alchemy, such as through feeling, processing the emotions, and allowing ourselves just to withdraw so that we can be in our own stillness, be in our own energy field, have some time to be quiet so we can heal, so we're not being pulled in a million different directions or being affected by so much of the outer energies or others' energies or our dynamics. So during this phase, seeking counsel if possible, if it's needed, and invitation for us during this phase is to seek counsel with someone who can understand this kind of spiritual, deeper component to support that aspect, and then supporting to come up with potentially how to support for each of us uniquely and individually. We don't need to seek counsel. I just want to bring this up and mention this because sometimes this is helpful, especially if you're not sure what you're going through or how to navigate through it, and you feel like you are really spiraling down, and you do need some extra support. So the next phase is where we actually start to go into some really deep inner work. This is, we go through seeking, and as the seeking stage starts to happen, now some of these stages can go intermittently, so I'm going to kind of go back and forth with these two stages. So stage of seeking and stage or phase of doing deeper inner work. This is where deep introspection happens. Oftentimes, these will go back and forth. I found, again, just kind of like grief, there's not always necessarily, there has to be a specific order of these phases. Sometimes we'll go in and out of them. Sometimes we'll be in a couple concurrently. So again, there's no right or wrong to any of this. These are just phases potentially to keep an eye out for as you're going through this. So the seeking stage is when we start to really want information. We want to read more. We want to listen to more podcasts. We want to have more conversations, maybe with people that we're seeking answers about, deeper answers. This is bringing us into something usually deeper. Remember, things that, how we saw things before are shattering. We want answers at this point at the seeking phase. So this could be, again, the books that you read. You might feel insatiable. You want a lot of, personal development or psychological books or spiritual books, or you want to read about people or beings, masters, or avatars that have gone before and, what their process was. So again, the invitation for us is if we're seeking something, definitely be open to that and know that when we're ready for something, it will present. So you don't have to know, I don't know where to start, just kind of say out to the universe, I'm ready, or just you'll naturally vibrationally even be doing that. And the right person will come by, the right book will come across your path, or, something will happen that will start to open up those pathways for us. And then the deep inner introspective work is where we start to really get into our inner child work or shadow work, or, just really starting to go within and do some deeper healing work. This is really a time where we want to allow ourselves and honor ourselves, again, where we've gone, where we've been, what we've experienced, what pain we still might have. Forgiveness work might come in this. And then again, honoring that space, honoring that time of healing. This is sometimes, courageous work because we're going into facing some elements of ourselves or of our life, that is very uncomfortable or sometimes very deep and very raw. And so again, gentle, loving space, and giving ourselves grace through this whole passage, but especially at this passage, because this is where often, I always like to say, really true self-transformation, transformation is not glamorous. And this stage is where it's absolutely not glamorous. And, this is the phase where oftentimes some people may see your real process, but most of the time this happens so privately and so internally and so behind the scenes, just because it's so raw and it's so deep. And again, if needed, definitely seek out some support or some healing, through this phase too. And, if you're not sure, again, this is where I always find the seeking and the deeper inner work really synergize and really align together, because usually you'll find a book, say you'll find a book on or a podcast on inner child work, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I have to do some inner child, or I want to and I don't know how to do it. So again, just organically it will start to come up, whatever is needed. This is also in the seeking phase where we really start to question, and that's the invitation. Question everything, question our beliefs, question our thoughts, question information that's coming at us. Because remember, part of this passage is a path of disillusionment. That is true enlightenment, is waking up and awakening to something we haven't been able to see before. Starting to really, truly know our, this is our own personal soul self starting to come through too. This is the ego integration. So even though sometimes our egoic constructs are falling away and that can be uncomfortable, our soul self is coming through more. And that's us starting to really know who we are at this deeper level, and being able to develop and nurture a conversation with our soul, a relationship, deeply being able to connect with our soul so that we can start to really hear our soul's resonance. And that's where we really start to come into this powerful, soul infused personality. And this is where our major, life potential, highest potential blueprint starts to really get activated and expressed, which means going through this on the other side of it, this is, we're coming into our fullest expression, or the next stage that we're ready for. Because again, this is going to be something that we will ebb and flow out of through our journey of life. So the next stage is the actual rebirth. And this is where a new us, a new me, a new you is coming forth. And this is where, we're starting to now go through a period of, we could be going through a period of integrating during this period, and we will start to express ourselves differently. It's where we just now start to reap the benefit and the gifts of what we just went through. We're different on the other side of it, but we've gained a new perspective. We've gained a new awareness. We've gained potentially new soul qualities. Maybe we're more compassionate. Maybe we're more gritty. Maybe we're just more loving. Maybe we're more creative. So whatever we've just gone through will definitely birth us a gift. So this is the rebirth phase. And this can be a little bit of an interesting phase too, because now we're trying to navigate through our world, or we're starting to all of a sudden be really clear. Like, I'm really clear that, this is still aspects of my life that, say a job or relationships, that you don't necessarily maybe want to leave, but you're learning how to now infuse yourself or relate differently. How can I now show up? Who am I now? How do I want to relate now, as a new me? And what does this look like? And so there's a period of reorientation in the rebirth. And sometimes there is a lot of changes that happen, but it will feel generally organic, because it will feel fulfilling, because it's something after going through the storm, so to speak. This is kind of like the sun's coming out and we're ready. Like, we want to actually start to live in a new way, live a new life, or a new expression of ourselves. And this could be, again, really subtle. It could be you just, you want to laugh more. It could be that you want to be more creative. It could be that you're just, you're not involved anymore in any drama or gossip or, negativity. It can be, it can be really subtle, all the way up to, just significant changes happening. And again, so many variables for each of us individually and uniquely going through this. That's why these are just general phases, and what we each need through each phase will depend on what's going on with us, the depth of the transformation that's happening, where we're already at in our transformational process and our soul's evolution, all these things. So the next phase is potentially where we go into, depending on, again, our soul's evolution, where we're going into what's called universal consciousness. And this is where we're starting to really see things from deeper perspectives, wider perspectives, or have more perspectives. This is where we might start to tune into and understand our multidimensionality, where we're starting to really remember who we are in relation to the cosmos, to the universe, relation, to where we're here, why we're here, what our purpose is, but, just remembering who we are in that bigger scope, in that bigger scheme of things. We can still go through some type. This is where, our true higher self, our true self is starting to really evolve, and more of that expression is evolving. So again, each stage, we on some level are going through this sometimes. And now, especially as we're going through this paradigm shift, this is going to be really a big stage that most people are going to be tapping into and going through, is remembering kind of our role, in the wider scope, multidimensionality wise, intergalactically wise, all of these things. So this is the process basically of the dark night of the soul, the path of enlightenment. It's kind of like the phoenix rising, the myth of or the symbolism, I should say, of the phoenix rising. We're going into the fire and we're releasing, burning off anything that's no longer serving. And that can come down to aspects of ourselves, old identities of ourselves, to beliefs, to things literally in the form. And then we rise anew, we rise as a new phoenix. And that's really what this passage is. So extremely powerful, very purposeful, and very significant, as we come out of it on the other side. So because we're going through this collectively right now, we at some level all will be going through this to some degree, because we're part of that collective. So let's go through some tips. We talked a couple: seeking counsel, potentially. One of the biggest ones is really allow ourselves to withdraw. Try not to feel the pressure or panic that we need to do things differently, or that we're going to miss out on something, or trying to manage and navigate through the pressure or the pulling of other people trying to pull us out if this is not actually in a healthy way where we need to be. Because the withdrawal period is very, very important and needed, because this is where kind of that deeper work happens. It can't happen if we're constantly busy or distracted. And that's one of our next tips is, let ourselves rest, sleep more. We may need to sleep more during this period of time, because we are healing at a lot of deeper levels and layers. And there's a lot that's going to be potentially alchemizing and transforming that we're not even conscious of. We call this back burner processing. There's a lot potentially that's being healed. And so when we sleep, that's where most of our healing happens. So during this phase, again, we may need more sleep. So what do we need to support that? Or discern, am I sleeping too much? Is this serving me? Or is this, kind of making me go down a rabbit hole that isn't healthy, and I'm going to have a hard time coming back up? So again, this is the discernment between when do I seek somebody for support through this passage? Do I need to? Resting. We are so conditioned that rest is not okay. We're actually shamed into not feeling like we can, that it's okay to rest, So finding a balance between when do I need to rest? And it's interesting because during this phase, we may just really need to be in stillness. And sometimes one of the most powerful things we can do is just really be in stillness, just being. And that could be just lying down, not thinking about anything, just literally lying on the floor, lying on the ground outside. It could be just letting ourselves sit quietly for, 5 minutes, for half an hour a day, where we're just in stillness, or a couple times a day, just focusing, on being, again, focusing maybe on our breath, but just focusing on nothing, just allowing. That's the other part of this tip is allowing what is happening. This is a process. This will pass. Each phase, there is a process and there is a phase. Now, sometimes during, especially some of the phases, we might feel like it's never going to end. So again, if you're in a longer one, important that you are seeking support or setting up more support for self, whatever that looks like, in order to support going through this, and knowing it will pass, it will end. There will be, we will come through onto the other side. We will eventually rise out of that fire. And so what do we need in that time? So again, rest, allowing ourselves to feel what's coming up, allowing ourselves to maybe withdraw a little bit, allow ourselves to be a bit misunderstood at the time, allowing ourselves to grieve, or allowing ourselves to, face some things that we previously weren't able to face. So whatever comes up in that way, allowing. Nourishment is important during this time, because nourishing helps us generally process things. We feel loved, we feel nurtured, we feel supported when we're nourishing ourselves. So that could be warm foods. It could be just nourishing whole grain foods. It could, like foods with prana, staying hydrated if possible during these times. Warm, it could be just you need more warmth. It could be you need more warm baths. It could be you need warm food like soups, things, teas, things like that. Sometimes you may feel like you need the other. You need cold water therapy. I feel sometimes at different phases, I know my own experience, I've needed both, even in the same day. So again, it's really tuning in to asking, what do I need? And if we don't know what we need, because we don't know, because there's just too much discombobulation happening and changing, then just ask maybe in the moment, what do I need right now just to feel relief? Or what do I need right now to feel some comfort? I always love coming back to the space change or state change theory or support, because sometimes that can help us, especially if we don't know what it is that we need. So it's like, okay, I'm not sure what I need, but I need to move energy. And that's the key. We want to move this energy. That helps to alchemize it. Sometimes that moving energy means we're in stillness. So if you don't feel, if there's a restlessness or you feel like I need to move this energy, I don't know how, space changes. If I'm inside, I'm going to go outside for a little bit. If I'm outside, I'm going to go in, or I'm going to change a room. I'm going to change the environment I'm in. State change means what can I do to potentially change the frequency that I'm in. So that could be, I'm going to do a breath meditation, or I'm going to watch a funny movie, or I'm going to go cook something that I love to do, and it's going to change my frequency. So again, depending on what we're capable of doing, what we feel we're in alignment to do, or what resonates at that time. And nature is honestly our biggest one. Our nature, sitting out in nature, being in nature, connecting with nature, connecting with Mama Earth. And if you don't have access, or it's cold wherever you are at the time, then it could be just bringing plants in. It could be bringing in your home. It could be looking out the window at the sky, at the sunrise or sunset, or a tree. So different things. It could be, if you do feel like you still don't have access to that, it could be looking at pictures of nature and connecting, or animals, connecting to animals, listening to the sound of the birds. So whatever that is, nature is definitely the most supportive, powerful tool going through this transformation, and the biggest healer. Always our answer, I feel. Okay, so Dark Night of the Soul invitation for us is to remember it is a passage of enlightenment. It is integration of our ego self into our soul self. And our soul is our true essence, our true sense of who we are. And remembering that it will pass. What we are experiencing will pass. Wishing you a beautiful day. Namaste.